When a businessman returns home earlier than expected, he catches something in the middle of the night that completely changes his view of everything he thought family was. The New York City sky dawned gray that Monday, as if announcing the weight of the day to come. From the penthouse of the tallest building on Fifth Avenue, Michael Harrison observed the city awakening while sipping his black coffee without sugar. He wore a custom Italian suit that enhanced his impeccable posture, built over years of negotiations and difficult decisions. At 42, he ran Nexus Tech, one of the largest technology companies in America, with branches on 3 continents and more than 2,000 employees. His cell phone vibrated for the 5th time in less than 10 minutes. It was Monica, his executive assistant, reminding him of the meeting with Korean investors that would start in an hour. Michael responded with a short and direct message, as he did with everything in his life. Efficiency was his trademark. Time was money, and money was something that never lacked in his bank account. In another room of the same penthouse, an 8-year-old boy was finishing getting ready for school, adjusting his uniform tie with still awkward fingers. Ethan Harrison had the same penetrating brown eyes as his father, but carried a premature melancholy in his gaze that didn't match his age. On his bedside table, a frame held the only photo he kept close, his mother, Beth, with a wide and luminous smile, hugging him on a beach in the Hamptons. 3 years had passed since Beth had departed after a sudden illness that shook the foundations of that family. For Michael, the solution was to dive even deeper into work, as if each new contract, each new acquisition could fill the void that remained. For Ethan, however, there was no immediate solution. Only silence, routine, and the growing feeling that, besides his mother, he had also lost part of his father. The apartment, decorated by a renowned architect, looked more like a magazine showroom than a home. Glass walls, white marble, carefully selected modern artwork. Everything impeccable, organized, cold. There were no children's drawings on the refrigerator, toys scattered around, or any sign that a child inhabited that space, except for Ethan's room, the only island of color and life in that ocean of sobriety. The sound of keys at the door announced the arrival of Sarah, punctually at 7 in the morning as every day. Tall, black, in her early 40s, Sarah, as everyone called her, brought with her a human warmth that contrasted with the atmosphere of the apartment. Initially hired just to handle cleaning and organization 3 times a week, her presence had become increasingly necessary and frequent. "Good morning, Ethan. Are you ready for school?" asked Sarah, leaving her bag on the kitchen counter and opening the curtains to let in what little daylight there was. Her sincere smile was received with another shy but genuine from the boy who now entered the kitchen. "Good morning, Sarah. I'm almost ready. Just need to have breakfast," he replied, sitting at the kitchen table where there was already a bowl, a box of cereal, and a small carton of milk. Sarah moved around the kitchen with familiarity, preparing a more substantial breakfast than the cereal that Ethan was about to serve himself. In minutes, she placed before him scrambled eggs, a slice of whole wheat bread with avocado, and a glass of fresh orange juice. "You need to eat properly to have energy in your brain. Today you have that math test, right?" Ethan's eyes widened, surprised that she remembered. "How do you know?" "Well, you told me on Friday, remember? And then we reviewed those fractions that were giving you trouble." Michael entered the kitchen at that moment, checking his expensive wristwatch, ready to leave. He nodded to Sarah, a brief and formal greeting, and then looked at his son. "I'm leaving, Ethan. I have a meeting with the Korean investors today, and then I'm flying to Boston. So I'll be back tomorrow night," he said while adjusting his tie knot. "Do you have everything you need for school?" "Yes, Dad," replied Ethan, without raising his eyes from his plate. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air for a few seconds, until Michael broke it with a clearing of his throat. "Well then, have a good day, Sarah. Please take care of everything." "Of course, Mr. Harrison," she replied while pouring a cup of coffee for herself. When the penthouse door closed, it was as if the air became lighter. Sarah sat at the table with Ethan, and they began to talk about simple things: the upcoming test, a science project about the solar system, the new classmate who had arrived from Florida, conversations that never happened when Michael was present. Outside the building, the businessman got into his imported car, where the driver was already waiting for him. In the back seat, he immediately opened his laptop and began to review the presentation's slides, numbers, graphs, market projections. His world was made of concrete data, measurable results, achievable goals. There was no room for uncertainties, for fragilities, for emotions he couldn't control. As the car navigated through New York's chaotic traffic, Michael received a call from Paul Mitchell, his technology director. "Michael, we have a problem with the new security system. The engineers detected a vulnerability that could compromise user data. How long to fix it? At least 48 hours of intensive work. We need to postpone the launch scheduled for next week." Michael felt his jaw tense. The launch of the new security system was the flagship of the presentation to the Koreans. It was the differentiator that could guarantee the investment of millions that the company needed to expand into the Asian market. "That's not an option, Paul. Gather the team. I want everyone working on this 24 hours a day if necessary. The launch happens as planned." As he hung up, Michael took a deep breath, massaging his temples. He had built Nexus from scratch, transforming a small startup with 3 employees into a technology giant. He would not allow last-minute obstacles to compromise what was at stake. Back at the apartment, Sarah was finishing packing Ethan's backpack, placing a loving note alongside the lunch she had prepared. It was a ritual that had begun almost a year ago when she noticed that the boy often returned with his food untouched. In the note, she always wrote a word of encouragement or an innocent joke. Small gestures that made Ethan smile in the middle of the school day. "It's time, little one. The driver should be waiting downstairs." Ethan picked up his backpack and walked to the door, but stopped before leaving. "Sarah, will you be here when I get back?" The question carried a greater weight than its simple words suggested. It was about presence, about constancy, about the security of knowing that someone would be waiting. "Yes, I will. Today I'm staying until later, remember? We're going to make that chocolate cake you like, to celebrate after the test." The boy's face lit up with a genuine smile, the kind that rarely appeared. With a wave, he left to face another day of school. Sarah stood watching the closed door for a few moments, feeling the weight of the responsibility she carried. She was not just an employee in that house. She had become, without planning, the only point of emotional stability in Ethan's life. She sighed, thinking of her own daughter, Emily, 16, who lived with her grandmother in Rochester. The longing squeezed her chest every day, but financial needs kept her there in New York, taking care of someone else's child while her own daughter grew up far from her eyes. As she began to organize the apartment, Sarah had no idea that in a few hours, an unexpected change would shake the fragile structure of that incomplete family, forcing everyone to face truths they had long tried to ignore. The meeting with the Korean investors had ended better than Michael expected. Sitting in first class on the plane to Boston, he savored a whiskey while mentally reviewing the high points of the negotiation. The investment was practically guaranteed, with only a few details to be formalized during the technology conference that would take place in the coming days. The phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Paul again, his technology director. "Boss, we have a serious problem." The voice on the other end sounded tense, almost desperate. Michael adjusted himself in his seat, feeling an uncomfortable tingling at the back of his neck, that familiar sensation that preceded corporate crises. "What happened now, Paul?" "The main servers went down. All of them, all at once. We're trying to identify the cause, but it seems to be something in the core of the proprietary operating system." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, processing the information. Nexus. Tech servers process data for banks, hospitals, and government agencies. A failure of this magnitude meant not only financial losses, but also possible damage to the company's reputation that had taken years to build. "How long to restore?" "We don't know yet. The IT team is working on it, but we need you here. There are critical decisions that only you can make." After hanging up, Michael called the flight attendant and informed her that he would need to disembark as soon as the plane landed. He would make his way back to New York immediately. The conference in Boston, the contacts with new clients, everything would have to wait. In moments like this, he only trusted himself to resolve the situation. 3 hours later, already at Boston's airport, he secured a spot on the last night flight to New York. Throughout the journey, he exchanged messages with the team, analyzed preliminary reports, and outlined damage control strategies. There was no time for rest when the empire he had built was under threat. Meanwhile, in the New York penthouse, the night was unfolding at a different pace. Ethan had gone to sleep after a productive afternoon with Sarah. Together, they had made the promised chocolate cake, reviewed homework, and even assembled part of a 500-piece puzzle that the boy had received on his birthday, but had never had the patience to put together alone. Sarah had stayed beyond her normal hours. It was almost midnight when she finally put away the last kitchen utensils and prepared to leave. She looked at the clock, hesitant. The last bus to her neighborhood had already left, and a taxi would consume a good part of what she had earned that day. So she decided to do something she rarely did, spend the night in the apartment's staff room. She sent a message to her mother in Rochester, letting her know that she would only return home the next day, and prepared to sleep. The room, although small compared to the rest of the luxurious apartment, was comfortable and rarely used. She was about to turn off the light when she heard a noise coming from the hallway, followed by a muffled cry. Ethan. Sarah immediately got up and headed toward the boy's room. She found him sitting on the bed, hugging his knees, his face marked by recent tears. "What happened, dear?" she asked, sitting beside him. "I had a nightmare," Ethan replied, his voice trembling. "I dreamed I was alone in a very big, dark house, calling for Dad and Mom, but nobody answered." Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. It wasn't the first time the boy had this type of dream. They were manifestations of a deep fear he carried, the fear of abandonment, of loneliness. "It was just a bad dream," she said, stroking his hair. "Would you like a cup of warm milk to help you go back to sleep?" Ethan nodded, wiping his tears with the backs of his hands. That's when Sarah noticed a small cut on his arm. "How did you hurt yourself?" "When I woke up scared, I hit my arm on the corner of the bedside table," he explained, looking at the wound as if he was just now noticing it. "Let's take care of that and then prepare that milk, okay?" The two headed to the kitchen. Sarah turned on only the dimmest light, creating a cozy environment in the half-light. While cleaning and bandaging the small cut, she talked in a low voice with Ethan about light things, gradually driving away the remnants of the nightmare. It was at this exact moment, with the kitchen partially illuminated and the apartment plunged into the silence of dawn, that Michael arrived. Exhausted after hours of flights and emergency meetings, he had decided to stop by home for a quick shower before heading to the office, where the IT team worked incessantly to resolve the crisis. Upon opening the penthouse door, he immediately realized that something was different. There was a light on in the kitchen, when everything should be dark at that hour. He placed his briefcase on the floor silently and walked toward the light, a strange sensation taking hold of him, part apprehension, part curiosity. The scene he found left him momentarily without reaction. Ethan, who should be sleeping, was sitting at the kitchen table in his dinosaur pajamas, holding a steaming mug. Sarah, who shouldn't even be there at that hour, was finishing bandaging the boy's arm, while telling him something in a low voice that made him smile, despite his eyes still damp with tears. There was an intimacy in that scene, a connection, that Michael did not recognize in his own relationship with his son. For a few seconds he remained standing in the hallway, observing without being noticed, feeling like an intruder in his own home. "Dad?" Ethan's voice broke the moment when he finally noticed Michael's presence. Sarah turned quickly, clearly surprised. "Mr. Harrison, we weren't expecting... Weren't you in Boston?" Michael entered the kitchen, still processing the situation. "There was a problem at the company. I had to come back," he responded mechanically, looking at his son. "What happened to your arm, Ethan?" "I had a nightmare and hurt myself on the bedside table when I woke up," explained the boy, his posture changing subtly, more contained, less relaxed than he was moments before. Michael noticed the change, just as he perceived the way Ethan unconsciously moved closer to Sarah, as if seeking protection. "And why are you here at this hour, Sarah?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral, although a part of him felt uncomfortable with the whole situation. "I stayed later today to help Ethan with a school project, and when I saw that I had missed the last bus, I decided to stay in the staff room, she explained with slight nervousness in her voice. I heard Ethan crying and came to see what had happened. Michael nodded slowly, not knowing exactly how to react. He was accustomed to crisis situations in business, where each decision was calculated, where there were protocols to follow. But there, faced with that domestic scene, he felt displaced, as if he were in unknown territory. I see, he finally said. Ethan, are you okay now? Can you go back to sleep? The boy nodded, still holding the mug of milk with both hands. Sarah made milk, with honey and cinnamon. She said it keeps nightmares away. Michael looked at the woman who lowered her eyes, perhaps fearing she had crossed some invisible boundary. It's just something my grandmother used to do when I was a child, she explained, with a shy smile. It always worked with my daughter, too. You have a daughter? The question escaped Michael's lips before he could contain it. He had worked with Sarah for how long? 2, 3 years. And only now was he discovering this detail about her personal life. Yes, Emily, 16 years old. She lives with my mother in Rochester. Michael nodded, feeling an uncomfortable pang of guilt. He had never really been interested in Sarah's personal life, never asked questions that went beyond her functions in the house. Well, I think we all need to rest, he said, breaking the silence that had settled. Ethan, finish your milk and go back to bed. I have to leave again in a few hours. You're not staying home? Ethan asked, and there was a note of disappointment in his voice that did not go unnoticed by Michael. I can't. There's an emergency at work that I need to resolve. There always is, muttered Ethan, so low that Michael almost didn't hear. Almost. Those 2 simple words hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. There was a painful truth in them, a silent accusation that he could not refute. I'll help, Ethan. Get back to bed, offered Sarah, noticing the growing tension, and then I'll retire as well if you don't need anything else. Michael made an affirmative gesture with his head, unable to articulate words at the moment. He watched Sarah and Ethan leave the kitchen, the boy automatically holding her hand, a gesture of trust that he had not directed at his own father for a long time. Alone in the kitchen, Michael poured himself a glass of water, trying to organize his thoughts. Something had changed that night, or perhaps he was just beginning to see a change that had been happening for a long time without him noticing. He walked to Ethan's room a few minutes later. The door was ajar, and he could see Sarah sitting on the edge of the bed, gently running her hand through the boy's hair, who was already falling asleep. She was telling him in a low voice a story about stars that transformed into guardians of children's dreams. Michael silently backed away, a knot forming in his throat. He remembered Beth, how she did exactly the same when Ethan was younger, how he himself, absorbed in work, rarely participated in these moments. He returned to his room and sat on the edge of the bed, his cell phone vibrating incessantly with messages from the crisis team. But for the first time in a long time, the corporate empire he had built didn't seem to be the most important thing demanding his attention. The days following the night of discovery passed in a frantic rhythm for Michael. The crisis in Nexus, tech servers demanded his full attention, with emergency meetings, calls with important clients, and endless hours poring over codes and technical reports. After 72 hours of almost uninterrupted work, the team finally managed to stabilize the system and begin the data recovery process. Michael arrived home on Friday, around 9 in the evening, with deep circles under his eyes and his body, crying out for rest. The apartment was quiet, but he noticed lights on in the hallway leading to Ethan's room. He walked in that direction without making noise and stopped near the half-open door. Ethan was sitting at his desk, focused on what appeared to be schoolwork. Several colored sheets, scissors, glue, and colored pencils scattered indicated some kind of art project. Sarah was by his side, helping him cut what looked like pictures of planets. Saturn is my favorite, Ethan was saying, carefully coloring a paper circle. Because of the rings. It really is the most beautiful, agreed Sarah. When I was your age, I dreamed of being an astronaut. Really? Ethan turned to her with eyes wide with admiration. And why didn't you become one? Sarah laughed softly. with a touch of melancholy that didn't escape Michael's observation. Life doesn't always take us where we dream when we're children, but that's not necessarily bad. I found other paths that made me happy. Like taking care of me? Asked Ethan, with an innocence that made Michael's heart tighten. Like taking care of you, she confirmed, affectionately messing up the boys. And like raising Emily, who also makes me very proud. When will I meet her? You said that in the next vacation she might come to New York. We're planning that. She's very excited to meet you too. She said she'll teach you how to play volleyball. She's the captain of her school team. The conversation continued, fluid and natural, as they worked together on the project about the solar system. Michael remained motionless, observing the dynamic between the two. There was an ease in that interaction that he couldn't establish with his own son, a genuine connection that had been built day by day, moment by moment, while he was busy building his corporate empire. Michael moved away silently and headed to his office. He sat in his Italian leather armchair and stayed there in the dark, thinking. The crisis at the company had been controlled, but he was beginning to realize that a much deeper and more personal crisis had been developing silently right under his nose. The next morning, Michael woke up later than usual. The apartment was quiet. On the kitchen table, he found a note written in Sarah's neat handwriting. Good morning, Mr. Harrison. I took Ethan to the science fair at school. His project about the solar system turned out beautiful. We'll be back around noon. I left coffee ready in the thermos and cut fruit in the refrigerator. Science fair. Michael didn't even know his son was participating in a science fair, another important event in Ethan's life, from which he was completely alienated. He felt a pang of guilt while serving himself coffee. His gaze wandered around the impeccably organized kitchen until it stopped at the refrigerator. There was something different there. Among the magnets holding shopping lists and the business card for the Japanese food delivery service, there were colorful drawings and school assignments from Ethan. How had he never noticed that before? He approached and examined each piece of paper. One drawing showed 3 stick figures, a tall man, a small boy, and a curly-haired woman in the middle, holding hands. My family, said the title in childish letters. Michael felt a lump in his throat. In Ethan's perception, Sarah was already part of the family, perhaps the only part that was really present. There was also an essay titled My Hero, with a top grade and praise from the teacher. Michael began to read, expecting, perhaps secretly hoping, to find something about himself. But the text talked about Sarah, about how she was strong for raising a daughter alone, for working hard, for always having a smile and a story to tell. She never gives up on anyone, Ethan had written, not even on me when I'm sad or on my dad when he gets stressed about work. Michael put the paper back on the magnet, feeling strangely exposed. His son observed him more than he imagined, noticed more than he gave him credit for. Driven by growing curiosity, Michael did something he had never done before. He began to explore his own apartment, paying attention to details he had always ignored in the daily rush. In the hallway leading to the bedrooms, he discovered more of Ethan's schoolwork discreetly hung. On a shelf in the living room, among business books and biographies of successful entrepreneurs, there were now some children's books and a photo album that he didn't recognize. He opened the album, intrigued. They were recent photos of Ethan. Ethan at the park, Ethan blowing out candles on a small cake. His last birthday, Michael realized with a tightness in his chest, in which he had participated only briefly between work calls. Ethan in costume at some school presentation. In many of the photos, Sarah appeared beside him, always smiling, always present. In none of them was Michael present. Continuing his exploration, he entered his son's room. He looked more carefully at the objects, the books, the toys. On the desk, he found an open notebook with the math homework half done. The notes in the margins were not in Ethan's handwriting, but Sarah's, patiently explaining the concepts that the boy found difficult. In the drawer of the bedside table, something caught his attention. A bundle of envelopes tied with a blue ribbon. He hesitated for a moment, aware that he was invading his son's privacy, but curiosity spoke louder. He took one of the envelopes and opened it carefully. "Dear Mom," began the letter, written in Ethan's irregular handwriting. Michael felt his heart tighten. They were letters to Beth, letters that would never be delivered, never be read by the recipient. A unilateral dialogue from a son trying to keep his mother's memory alive in the only way he had found. "Today I got a good grade in English. Sarah was proud. She helped me study every night after Dad went to sleep. She said you would be proud. Of me too." Michael returned the letter to the envelope with trembling hands. There were dozens of them, all addressed to Beth, all telling the small and big events in Ethan's life. And in almost all of them, Sarah appeared as a constant presence, an emotional anchor, while he himself was mentioned only in passing, almost like a secondary character in his son's life. He was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Quickly, he put the letters back in the drawer and left the room. In the hallway, he met Ethan and Sarah, who were returning from the science fair. The boy proudly carried a silver medal hung around his neck. "Dad, you're home," exclaimed Ethan, genuinely surprised. "I am," replied Michael, trying to disguise the emotion he still felt after discovering the letters. "How was the fair?" "Amazing. My project about the solar system won second place among all the third grades." Ethan showed the medal, his eyes shining with excitement. "Sarah helped me make the planets look real with different textures and everything." "Congratulations, son, that's really impressive," said Michael, realizing how inadequate his words sounded. He should have been there, seeing his son present his project, sharing that moment of pride. "Mr. Harrison, I hope you don't mind, but I promised Ethan a special lunch to celebrate," said Sarah, a slight nervousness in her voice as if she feared she was crossing boundaries. "Of course I don't mind," he replied, and then, on impulse, added, "In fact, I'd like to join you." "If that's not a problem." Both Sarah and Ethan seemed momentarily surprised by the unexpected invitation. It was Ethan who broke the silence with cautious enthusiasm. "Really, Dad, don't you have to work today?" The question, so simple and direct, carried the weight of all the times Michael had chosen work over his son. All the missed meals, ignored school events, wasted moments of connection. "Not today," replied Michael, feeling strangely vulnerable. "Today I'd like to hear all about your project and how you earned that medal." The smile that lit up Ethan's face was worth more than any million-dollar contract Michael had ever closed. Sarah observed the scene with an expression that mixed surprise and something that seemed to be hope. "Great," she exclaimed, recovering quickly. "I'll prepare that lasagna that Ethan loves, and maybe we could eat on the terrace since the day is so beautiful." While Sarah headed to the kitchen and Ethan ran to put away his medal and project materials, Michael stood in the hallway, a strange sensation taking hold of him. It was as if he were seeing his own home, his own life, with new eyes. As if, for the first time in a long time, he was really present, not just physically, but emotionally. And with this new vision came a painful revelation. How much he had lost, how much he continued to lose each day that he let himself be consumed by work, by the incessant pursuit of success that suddenly seemed empty when compared to his son's genuine smile upon realizing that his father would be present for a simple family meal, a family that Michael was beginning to understand had been silently rebuilt without him noticing. A family of which he was dangerously close to becoming just a distant observer, a peripheral figure in his own son's life. The lunch on the terrace became a transformative moment for Michael. Watching Ethan excitedly recount every detail of the science fair, his eyes shining with enthusiasm, made something awaken within him. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing him to really see his son for the first time in years, not as a responsibility, a consequence of his marriage to Beth, but as a complete person, with his own dreams, fears, talents, and needs. Sarah served the lasagna, participating in the conversation with occasional comments, but keeping herself discreetly in the background, as if she felt that this moment belonged to the two of them, father and son. Michael noticed this silent gesture and appreciated it, although he also noticed how Ethan automatically included Sarah in each story, in each joke, in each shared memory. And then Mrs. Jenkins said, that my explanation about Saturn's rings was the best in the class, Ethan was saying between one forkful and another. I only knew that because Sarah showed me a super cool documentary last Sunday, didn't you, Sarah? Yes, I did, she confirmed with a smile. But you paid a lot of attention. You wrote everything down in your special notebook. Special notebook? Asked Michael, genuinely interested. It's a notebook where I write down important things I want to remember, explained Ethan. Things about space, about dinosaurs, about countries I want to visit someday. I didn't know you were so interested in these subjects, admitted Michael, feeling a pang of shame for knowing so little about his own son's passions. There's a lot of cool stuff in there, said Ethan, suddenly animated. Do you want to see it after lunch? The question caught Michael by surprise. It was an invitation to enter Ethan's personal world, a world from which he had been absent by his own choice for so long. I'd love to, he replied, sincerely. The rest of the lunch proceeded in a relaxed atmosphere that Michael hadn't experienced in years. When they finished, Ethan ran to get his special notebook, leaving Michael and Sarah alone on the terrace for a few moments. He's an amazing boy, commented Michael, breaking the silence. Yes, he is, agreed Sarah, beginning to collect the plates. Very intelligent and sensitive, sometimes too much for his age. Michael helped her stack the dishes, a simple gesture he had never made before. Sarah, he began, hesitant, I wanted to thank you for everything you've been doing for Ethan. It goes far beyond what I hired you to do. She paused for a moment, visibly surprised by the unexpected thanks. You don't need to thank me, Mr. Harrison. Ethan is a special boy. It's easy to care about him. Still, insisted Michael, you have been a constant presence in his life when I haven't been. Sarah looked him directly in the eyes for the first time since they had begun that conversation. You're here now. That's what matters. Before Michael could respond, Ethan came running back with his notebook, interrupting the moment. For the next hour, Michael immersed himself in his son's private universe, discovering interests, dreams, and thoughts he had never imagined. Detailed drawings of dinosaurs, facts about planets noted down in neat handwriting, magazine cutouts about distant countries, all organized with a care that surprised Michael. This is incredible, Ethan, he said, genuinely impressed. You have a lot of talent for drawing. Sarah says I take after Mom in that, replied Ethan naturally, turning another page. She showed me some drawings that Mom made when she was young. Did you know she wanted to be an architect before she met you? Michael felt a tightness in his chest. Yes, he knew. Beth had abandoned the dream of architecture to accompany him in his rising career, always supporting his projects, always putting his ambitions ahead of her own. And now, he realized with regret, he was doing the same with his son, prioritizing his own professional trajectory at the expense of their relationship. I knew, he finally replied, your mother was very talented. Sarah kept some of her drawings for me, continued Ethan, turning a few more pages of the notebook to reveal delicate sketches attached with clips. Look, this one is the design of a house that she wanted to build someday. Michael immediately recognized the drawing. It was a project that Beth had made years before, when they still dreamed of a country house for the weekends, a dream that was postponed by important meetings, business trips, unavoidable commitments until it was completely forgotten. Where did you find this? He asked, his voice slightly choked. It was in a box in the closet in your dressing room, explained Sarah, who was observing the scene from the terrace door. When I organized things last year, I found several boxes with Mrs. Harrison's belongings. I thought Ethan should know a little more about his mother, so I separated some things that I thought he would like to see. Michael nodded, unable to express in words the gratitude he felt at that moment. Sarah had done what he couldn't. Keep Beth's memory alive for Ethan, create a connection between mother and son that transcended physical absence. I'm thinking of being an architect too, declared Ethan, carefully closing the notebook. Or an astronaut or a paleontologist, I haven't decided yet. Michael smiled, feeling a wave of affection for his son. You have time to decide, and whatever it is, I'll support you. Ethan's eyes lit up with cautious hope. Even if it's not, working at your company, you always say that someday I'm going to take over everything. The question hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. It was true. He had always talked about Nexus Tech as a legacy for Ethan, without ever considering that his son might have his own dreams, his own ambitions. Even then, he assured, placing his hand on his son's shoulder, the most important thing is that you're happy doing what you love. The smile that Ethan gave him in response was like a ray of sunshine breaking through dense clouds after days of storms. In the weeks that followed, Michael made a conscious effort to be more present. He reorganized. His schedule, delegated responsibilities that he previously insisted on concentrating, cancelled non-essential trips. It wasn't easy. Years of ingrained habits don't disappear overnight. But each small moment shared with Ethan was worth the effort. He started arriving home earlier, in time to have dinner with his son. Sometimes he would find Sarah still, present, preparing the meal or helping Ethan with homework. In these moments he found himself increasingly comfortable with her presence, not just as an employee, but as an essential part of that small family that was rebuilding itself. One Tuesday, Michael arrived home in the middle of the afternoon, something unthinkable until a few weeks ago. He found the living room empty, but heard voices coming from Ethan's room. He approached silently and saw Sarah sitting on the edge of the bed, talking on the phone with a worried expression. "I know, Mom, I understand. Yes, I'll find a way to come there. No, don't worry about that now. The important thing is that Emily gets well. Tell her I'll be there as soon as possible." Upon hanging up, Sarah remained seated, shoulders slumped, an expression of anguish that Michael had never seen on her normally serene face. "Any problem?" he asked, revealing his presence. Sarah stood up quickly, visibly surprised. "Mr. Harrison, I didn't know you were home." "I just arrived. Is everything okay? You seem worried." She hesitated, as if she were evaluating how much she could share. "It's my daughter, Emily," she finally replied. "She had an accident during a volleyball game. Nothing serious, thank God, but she sprained her ankle badly and needs help to get around. My mother is taking care of her, but she's elderly and is having difficulties." "You need to go to Rochester," concluded Michael, not as a question but as a statement. "Yes," confirmed Sarah, a tone of resignation in her voice. "I was thinking of asking for a few days off if that's not a problem. I know it's complicated with Ethan and everything else, but—" "Of course it's not a problem," interrupted Michael. "Your daughter needs you. That comes first." Sarah seemed genuinely surprised by the immediate and understanding response. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I promise to make up the days when I return." Michael made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "Don't worry about that now. When do you need to go?" "As soon as possible. There's a bus leaving tonight." "Leave that to me. I'll arrange for a driver to take you. It will be faster and more comfortable." Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but Michael interrupted her again. "I insist. It's the least I can do after everything you've done for us." The gratitude in Sarah's eyes was so genuine that Michael felt momentarily embarrassed. Such a simple gesture for him, with his resources and connections, meant so much to her. "And what about Ethan?" asked Sarah, the concern evident in her voice. "He's used to my presence. It will be hard for him." Michael felt the weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders. It was true. Ethan depended emotionally on Sarah in a way that he didn't depend on him, his own father. Her absence, even if temporary, would be deeply felt. "I'll take care of him," he replied with a determination that surprised them both. "It's more than time for me to assume my role as a father. For real." "Are you sure? Your schedule is always so full." "I'm sure," affirmed Michael, realizing that he really meant it. "I can work from home for the next few days. The company won't collapse if I'm not physically present for a while." At that moment, Ethan arrived from school accompanied by the driver who picked him up daily. Seeing his father at home at that hour, his face lit up with a surprised smile. But he soon noticed Sarah's worried expression, and his smile disappeared. "What happened?" he asked, looking from one to the other. Sarah explained the situation in simple words, trying not to alarm the boy. Ethan listened attentively, his forehead furrowed in concern. "You'll come back, right?" he asked when Sarah finished speaking, a note of insecurity in his voice that made Michael's heart tighten. "Of course I will, dear," she assured, kneeling to be at eye level with him. "It's just for a few days, until Emily gets better." "Promise?" "I promise," said Sarah, extending her pinky finger to seal the promise in the way children do. "And meanwhile, your dad will stay with you. You two will have special time together." Ethan looked at Michael, a mixture of hope and skepticism in his gaze. "Is it true, Dad? Will you stay with me? Without working all the time?" The question was simple, but loaded with years of disappointments, of unfulfilled promises, of absences justified by work. Michael felt the weight of each one of them as he held his son's gaze. "It's true," he replied, extending his hand to touch Ethan's shoulder. "I'll be here with you, and we'll make the most of this time together." Later, while helping Sarah organize her hasty trip, Michael found himself reflecting on how he had reached that point. How had he allowed an employee hired for domestic services to become more present in his son's life than he himself was? And how now, faced with her temporary absence, did he feel so insecure about his ability to care for his own son? But along with the insecurity, there was also a growing determination. A chance for reconnection, for rebuilding, an opportunity he didn't intend to waste. The first days without Sarah were more challenging than Michael had imagined. Small details of Ethan's routine, which previously went unnoticed, now revealed themselves in all their complexity. What was the right temperature for bath water? What stories did he like to hear before bed? How to deal with the reluctance to eat vegetables at dinner? They were simple everyday questions, but they left Michael disconcerted, highlighting how much he had alienated himself from his son's daily life. On the first morning, the alarm went off at 6 as usual. Michael got up automatically, ready for his usual routine of quick exercises, shower and email review, even before breakfast. But then he remembered there was no Sarah to prepare Ethan's breakfast, pack his backpack, ensure he had everything for school. These tasks were now his. With a sigh, he changed from his workout clothes to a robe and headed to the kitchen. He tried to remember what Sarah usually prepared for breakfast. Eggs, pancakes, cereal. He opted for the simplest: toast, orange juice, and a fruit. But even this proved to be a challenge when he realized he didn't know where half the utensils in his own kitchen were. When Ethan appeared, still sleepy and with his hair disheveled, Michael had already burned 2 pieces of toast and spilled juice on the counter. "Good morning, son," he greeted, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Breakfast is almost ready." Ethan looked at the table, at the slightly carbonized toast, and then at his father, with an expression that mixed surprise and amusement. "Sarah always makes pancakes on Tuesdays," he commented, without accusation in his voice, just stating a fact. "Oh," replied Michael, suddenly feeling inadequate. "I didn't know. I can try to make pancakes if you want." Ethan seemed to evaluate for a moment the state of the kitchen and his father's tense expression before responding. "It's okay. Toast is good too." The rest of the morning was a rush to ensure that Ethan was ready for school on time. Michael discovered that the uniform he had set out wasn't the correct one for Tuesday. Apparently there were physical activities, which required the sports uniform. The boy's toothbrush was mysteriously missing, found later inside a cup in the bathroom cabinet. And the math homework that should have been in the backpack had been forgotten on the desk. When they finally managed to leave the apartment, they were already 15 minutes late. In the car on the way to school, Michael tried to establish a conversation. "So, how are the math classes going? Still having trouble with fractions?" Ethan looked at him with surprise, clearly not expecting his father to know about his school. "And difficulties? A little, but Sarah has been helping me. She invented a way to explain using pizza. It makes it easier to understand." Michael nodded, making a mental note to ask Sarah about this method when she returned. Or better yet, perhaps he himself could discover a way to help. "Maybe we can review that together tonight. I used to be good at math in school." The look that Ethan gave him, a mixture of hope and skepticism, made Michael realize how much he would need to work to regain his son's trust. For Ethan, his father's promises were frequently forgotten amid urgent calls and last-minute meetings. "Really? Won't you need to work?" "I'll be working from home these days," explained Michael. "But I promised to set aside time for us to study together." Upon dropping Ethan at school, Michael felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief for having overcome the first challenge of the morning, apprehension for what was still to come. Driving back home, he called Monica, his assistant, and reorganized his entire schedule. Meetings were postponed, video conferences replaced face-to-face encounters. He delegated tasks that he would normally insist on personally supervising. "Is everything okay, Michael?" asked Monica, clearly surprised by the drastic changes. I've never seen you postpone the board meeting before." "Everything's fine," he confirmed, "just needing a few days to take care of personal matters." Upon hanging up, Michael realized that for the first time in years, he was putting his personal life ahead of business. And the most surprising thing, the world wasn't falling apart because of it. That first night without Sarah was revealing. After picking Ethan up from school, Michael tried to help him with homework, prepare a decent dinner, and still participate in an important video conference. The result was homework half done, overcooked pasta, and a meeting interrupted 3 times by urgent domestic issues. But in the midst of that confusion, something unexpected happened. While they were sitting at the dinner table, Ethan suddenly began to laugh. "What is it?" asked Michael, confused. "You have tomato sauce on your eyebrow," explained the boy between laughs. Michael ran his hand across his forehead and realized it was true. Soon he was laughing too, the tension of the day dissolving in that moment of levity, shared. When the laughter subsided, Ethan looked at him with a serious expression. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Thank you for staying with me, even though you don't know how to make pancakes." Michael felt a lump in his throat. "I'll learn to make pancakes," he promised, "and anything else you like." On the third day without Sarah, Michael received a call from her, informing him that she would need to stay longer in Rochester. Emily's ankle was worse than initially assessed, and recovery would be slower. Additionally, her mother, Emily's grandmother, wasn't feeling well and also needed care. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison," said Sarah, clearly distressed. "I know I promised Ethan I'd be back soon, but I can't leave my family in this situation." "Don't worry," replied Michael, surprising himself with the tranquility in his voice. "Take care of your family. Ethan and I are managing well." It was a half-truth. They were managing, but well would be an exaggeration. The routine continued to be challenging, with small domestic disasters and moments of frustration. However, amid the difficulties, something was blossoming. A genuine connection between father and son, built in daily small interactions, in trial, and error in conversations before bed. 1 week passed, then 2. Michael established a new routine, adapting his work around Ethan's needs. He discovered that he could be surprisingly productive in the hours when his son was at school, which allowed him to be fully present in the late afternoons and evenings. It was during this period that Michael really began to know Ethan, not just his superficial tastes, favorite foods, TV shows, preferred toys, but his deeper concerns, his dreams, his fears. During a homework help session, he discovered that Ethan felt intimidated by a classmate. One night, while they were building a rocket model together, the boy revealed that he was still afraid of the dark and therefore kept a lamp on during the night, something that Michael had never noticed. And it was on one of these nights, while tucking Ethan into bed after they had read a chapter of a book about space explorers together, that the question came, unexpected and direct, as only children know how to be. "Dad, do you think Mom would be sad to see how you became after she left?" Michael felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. In 3 years, he had never really talked with Ethan about Beth, about the pain of loss, about how they both had dealt, or not, with the void she had left. "Why do you ask that?" he managed to reply, buying time to organize his thoughts. Ethan shrugged, distractedly fiddling with the edge of the blanket. "It's just that Sarah said once that Mom was the happiest person she had ever met, that she always found a way to see the good side of things, but after she left you never really smiled anymore. Only now these days, you're smiling more." Michael sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by an emotion he couldn't name. It was true. After Beth's departure, he had closed himself in a shell of work and efficiency, as if living only halfway, fulfilling functions, but without really being present, without really feeling. "I think so," he finally admitted. "I think she would be sad. Not because I worked too much, but because I stopped really living. I stopped being present for you. Your mother always put family first." Sarah says that different people deal with sadness in different ways, that there isn't a right or wrong way to miss someone. Michael smiled softly, recognizing the wisdom in Sarah's words. "She's right. And know one thing, Ethan. Even in my hardest days, even when it seemed like I only cared about work, I always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it without her here to show me how." Ethan extended his small hand and touched his father's face, a gesture so reminiscent of Beth that Michael felt his eyes burn with contained tears. "We can learn together," said the boy, with a maturity that surprised Michael. "Yes," he agreed, leaning down to kiss his son's forehead. "We can learn together." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Michael sat in the darkened living room looking at the city lights through the panoramic window. He thought of Beth, of how proud she would be of the son they were raising. He thought of Sarah, and how she had silently held together the fragments of that family during the years he had been emotionally absent. And he thought of himself, of the choices he had made, of the priorities he had established, and of the changes he now realized were necessary. His phone rang, breaking the moment of reflection. It was Paul, his technology director. "Michael, we need you tomorrow at the meeting with the Japanese investors. They insist on speaking directly with you. They won't accept substitutes." A few months ago, Michael would have reorganized everything to meet this demand without questioning. The Japanese investors represented a crucial expansion for Nexus, a strategic move he had been planning for years. "I can't tomorrow, Paul," he replied, surprising both the director and himself. "It's Ethan's presentation day at school, I promised. I would be there." "But Michael, we're talking about millions in investment. We can reschedule Ethan's presentation. Explain to him the importance." "No," interrupted Michael, with a quiet firmness. "Some promises can't be broken. Let's reschedule." With the Japanese. If the deal is really important to them, they'll understand. Upon hanging up, Michael felt a strange lightness. He had just made a decision that weeks ago he would have considered unthinkable. And the most surprising thing, he didn't feel even a bit of regret. The next morning during breakfast, pancakes that he had finally learned to make without burning, his phone vibrated with a message. It was a photo sent by Sarah, her smiling alongside a curly-haired teenager with a bandaged ankle, both giving a thumbs up. "Emily is getting better. I should be back next week. How are you two managing?" Michael looked at Ethan, who was happily devouring the pancakes while animatedly telling about the school presentation that day. He took a photo of the two of them, with the messy breakfast table and sincere smiles, and sent it to Sarah with a simple message. "We're finding our way." The LaGuardia airport was buzzing with activity that Friday afternoon. Michael and Ethan were waiting in the arrivals area, the boy holding a colorful sign he had made himself, which read, "Welcome back, Sarah and Emily," decorated with stars and hearts. "Do you think they'll like the surprise?" asked Ethan for the third time in less than 10 minutes, the anxiety evident in his voice. "I'm sure they will," replied Michael, adjusting the bouquet of flowers he was holding. The 3 weeks without Sarah had turned into a full month, longer than anyone had initially expected. Emily's recovery had been slower than anticipated, and Sarah's mother's health had also required care. But now, finally, they were arriving. Not just Sarah, but also her daughter, who would spend the school holidays in New York. The decision to pick them up at the airport, Michael had insisted on sending air tickets instead of letting them make the long bus journey, had been Ethan's. "We need to do something special for them," he had said with conviction, "like a welcome home party." Michael smiled as he remembered his son's determination to plan every detail. The sign, the flowers, the cake they had ordered from Sarah's favorite bakery. In just 1 month, Ethan seemed different, more confident, more open, more willing to express his ideas and feelings, and Michael also felt transformed. The weeks caring for his son alone had been a challenge, no doubt. There were days of frustration, nights of exhaustion, moments when he questioned his ability to balance work and fatherhood. But there were also moments of pure joy, the shared laughter, the conversations before sleep, the small daily victories, like finally mastering the pancake recipe, or managing to organize school materials without forgetting anything. The announcement of the arrival of the flight from Rochester interrupted his thoughts. Ethan pressed the sign against his chest, almost jumping with excitement. "They're here, Dad, they're here." In a few minutes, the first passengers began to appear, and then there they were, Sarah with her warm smile, and beside her a curly-haired teenager in a ponytail, leaning on a crutch, her ankle still bandaged, but with a smile that was strikingly similar to her mother's. "Sarah, Emily!" shouted Ethan, running toward them with the sign held high. The hug that followed was warm and spontaneous. Ethan wrapped his arms tightly around Sarah's waist while she kissed the top of his head, visibly moved by the reception. Emily observed the scene with curiosity until Ethan turned to her. "You're Emily, I'm Ethan. Sarah told me all about you." The teenager smiled, extending her free hand for a greeting. "And she told me all about you too. She said you're the smartest boy she knows." Ethan blushed with pride while Michael approached, handing the bouquet to Sarah. "Welcome," he said with a formality that soon dissolved when Sarah, overcoming the initial surprise with the gesture, smiled in thanks. "We weren't expecting a reception like this," she commented, clearly touched. "It was Ethan's idea," explained Michael. "He planned everything." On the way home, the car was filled with the animated conversations of Ethan and Emily, who seemed to have developed an instant connection, despite the age difference. He bombarded the teenager with questions about volleyball, about her school, about what it was like to live in a small town. She responded with patience and genuine interest, returning questions about his favorite games, about school, about the cool places to visit in New York. Sarah observed the interaction with a serene smile, occasionally exchanging glances with Michael, who was driving. There was an unformulated question in these looks, a curiosity about how the month had been, how father and son had managed on their own. When they arrived at the apartment, Ethan ran ahead to show the final surprise. The table set for a special snack with the cake in the center, and a welcome banner hung on the wall. "You did all this?" asked Sarah, genuinely surprised. "I helped Dad with the decoration," explained Ethan, proud. "He wanted to buy normal balloons, but I said you would like star-shaped balloons better." "And you were right," confirmed Sarah, looking around with appreciation. "It's perfect." During the snack, stories flowed naturally. Emily told about the accident during the volleyball game, about the classes she was missing, about how she was eager to see New York. Ethan talked non-stop about everything they had done in the last month, the trips to the park, the science project that had received top marks, the new 1,000-piece puzzle he was putting together with his father. "It seems like you had a lot of fun," commented Sarah, looking at Michael with an expression that he couldn't completely decipher. There was surprise there, but also something else, something like approval. "We had our moments," he replied with a smile. "Some trial and error." "Many errors," interrupted Ethan, laughing. "At first, Dad didn't even know where my uniforms were. Or how to program the washing machine," added Michael, joining in the joke. "I still remember the absurd amount of foam I produced on the first attempt." Laughter echoed through the room, creating an atmosphere of lightness and intimacy that the apartment hadn't known for a long time. Michael observed how Ethan interacted comfortably with Emily, how Sarah seemed relaxed, how even he himself felt at ease in that impromptu gathering. This is how it should be, he realized. This is what made a home, not the glass walls, the imported marble, or the expensive artwork, but the people, the connections, the genuine affection. Later, when Ethan took Emily to show his room and his collection of books about space, Michael and Sarah were left alone in the living room, collecting the plates and storing the leftovers. "The apartment is impeccable," commented Sarah, looking around with approval. "I didn't expect to find everything so organized." "We had to learn quickly," replied Michael, putting the last cups in the dishwasher. but I confess that I hired a cleaning company to come yesterday and ensure that everything was perfect for your arrival." Sarah laughed, shaking her head. "That explains it. I was starting to think you had secret domestic organization skills." There was a moment of comfortable silence between them, until Michael spoke again in a more serious tone. "Sarah, I wanted to thank you, not just for everything you've done for Ethan all these years, but also for showing me what I was missing." She stopped what she was doing and looked at him, surprised by the frankness. "I didn't do anything special, Mr. Harrison, I just cared." "Exactly," he replied, holding her gaze. "You cared when I was too busy to do the same, and this month, without you, it was difficult, but it was also revealing. I realized how much time I had lost, how many moments I had let pass by. But I also realized that there's still time to recover, to build something new." Sarah nodded slowly, as if weighing his words. "Ethan is different," she commented. "Happier, more secure. Whatever you two discovered together this month, it worked." "We discovered that we are a family," Michael said simply. "Incomplete, imperfect, still learning to function without Beth, but still a family." A sound of laughter coming from Ethan's room interrupted the conversation. Emily appeared in the hallway, still leaning on the crutch, but moving with more ease than at the airport. "Mom, you need to see this. Ethan has an incredible telescope. He's showing me how to locate Jupiter." Sarah smiled at her daughter, making a gesture to indicate that she would be there in a minute. When she looked back at Michael, there was a question in her eyes. "And now, what happens when everything goes back to normal? Do you go back to the usual routine, meetings, trips, working until late?" It was a fair question, a legitimate concern. Michael knew that his actions in the coming weeks would say more than any promises he could make now. "Things will go back to normal," he admitted. "I still have a company to run, but other things have changed permanently. My priorities, mainly. I've reorganized my schedule, delegated responsibilities, reduced trips to the essential. Ethan comes first now." Sarah seemed satisfied with the response. "I'm glad to hear that. He deserves to have his father present." Michael hesitated for a moment and then added, "There's something else I want to discuss with you. It's about your work here." Sarah immediately tensed, a shadow of concern crossing her face. "Mr. Harrison, if it's about the time I was away, I can make up for it. Work extra hours." "It's nothing like that," he interrupted gently. "Actually, I want to offer a change. You've been much more than an employee in this house, Sarah. You've been a fundamental presence in Ethan's life. There's support that even I didn't know how much we needed." He paused, carefully choosing his next words. "I'd like to formalize this, offer you a different position with better conditions, appropriate benefits. And also, there's the guest room that we never use. It's spacious, has its own bathroom. I was thinking that maybe if you and Emily want, it could be an option while she's in New York, or even permanently." Sarah's eyes widened at the unexpected proposal. "Are you offering for me to live here? With my daughter?" "I'm offering an option," clarified Michael. "No pressure, no expectations beyond what you already do so well. I know that you commute for more than 2 hours every day, that the situation with your mother in Rochester is complicated, that Emily is at an important age and you miss each other. I thought this could be a solution that benefits all of us." Sarah was silent for a long moment, clearly processing the proposal and its implications. "I need to think about this," she finally said. "Talk to Emily. Consider what would be best for both of us." "Of course," agreed Michael. "There's no rush, it's just an idea, a possibility." At that moment, Ethan called from the room, excited about something he wanted to show. Sarah gave Michael one last thoughtful look before joining the children. In the weeks that followed, a new dynamic began to establish itself. Sarah returned to work, but now with Emily frequently present, enjoying the school holidays in New York. The teenager adapted quickly to the new city and, to Ethan's delight, became a constant companion, helping him with school tasks, teaching him to play volleyball when her ankle finally recovered, sharing with him the interest in astronomy. Michael kept his promise to reorganize his priorities. There were still days of intense work, important meetings that couldn't be postponed, but there were also family dinners, help with homework, weekends at the park. And gradually, the once impersonal apartment began to gain new contours. More photos on the walls, more books on the shelves, more signs of life and human presence. It was on one of these family dinner nights, almost 2 months after Sarah and Emily's return, that the answer finally came. They were all at the table, Michael, Ethan, Sarah and Emily, sharing stories of the day and plans for the weekend, when Sarah softly cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. "I have something to tell you," she announced, exchanging a knowing look with her daughter. "Emily and I have talked a lot in the last few weeks about Mr. Harrison's proposal. We weighed the pros and cons, considered all the options." Ethan looked confused from one adult to the other, clearly not knowing what it was about. "What proposal?" "About the possibility of Sarah and Emily living here with us," explained Michael, feeling a sudden apprehension. What if they had decided it wasn't a good idea? If they preferred to maintain professional distance, clear boundaries? Ethan's face lit up with the news. "Really? You're going to live here? Forever?" "Well, that's the question," continued Sarah, a smile beginning to form on her lips. "We decided that yes, we would like to accept the invitation, but with some conditions." Michael nodded, trying to hide the relief he felt. "What conditions?" "First, I want to continue working, but with more flexible hours so I can keep up with Emily's studies." "Perfectly reasonable," agreed Michael. "Second, we need to adapt the guest room to accommodate both of us comfortably. Maybe some shelves for her books, a space for a small office. We can do a complete renovation if you prefer. There's the adjacent office that I never use. We could incorporate it into the room." "And third," continued Sarah, now with an open smile, "we need to redefine some roles here. If we're all going to live together, I can't just be the employee who lives in the boss's house. We need to be a family. In a different way, perhaps. Not conventional, but a family." The E word hung in the air, loaded with meaning. Family. It was what they had become without realizing it over the years. A family built not by blood ties or social conventions, but by daily choices, by mutual care, by constant presence. "That would be amazing," exclaimed Ethan, jumping from his chair to hug Sarah and then Emily. "We'll be like siblings, Emily." The teenager laughed, affectionately ruffling the boy's hair. "More like a super cool older sister who will teach you all the tricks to survive middle school." Michael observed the scene, feeling a deep gratitude for Sarah, who had entered their lives as an employee and had become much more. For Emily, who brought a new energy to the house. For Ethan, who had never stopped believing that they could be a family, even when he himself had lost that faith. And for Beth, who somehow remained present in her son's smiles, in the moments of connection, in the love that persisted and transformed. That night, later, when everyone had already retired, Michael sat alone on the terrace, contemplating the city lights. He thought about the corporate empire he had built, the professional achievements, the awards and recognition, and then he thought about the new configuration his personal life was taking, the bonds that were being rebuilt, the home that was being rediscovered. He smiled to himself, imagining what Beth would say if she could see the transformation. She would probably say that she always knew he would find his way back to what really mattered, that she always believed that, beneath the successful businessman, there was still the man capable of loving and being loved, of building meaningful connections, of prioritizing human bonds above all else. From the terrace door he heard a soft voice. "Can't sleep?" Sarah was standing there wrapped in a simple robe, her hair loose falling over her shoulders, in a way that Michael had never noticed before. "Just thinking," he replied, indicating the place beside him, "about how life takes unexpected turns." She approached, leaning on the railing beside him. "Regretting the proposal?" she asked, a slight tone of playfulness in her voice, but with a hint of genuine insecurity. "On the contrary," assured Michael, looking back at the city. "I think it's the best decision I've made in years, for all of us." They stayed in silence for a moment, a comfortable silence filled only by the distant sounds of the city. "Ethan is very much like his mother," commented Sarah softly. "He has the same open heart, the same capacity to see the best in people." Yes, agreed Michael. And thanks to you, he didn't lose that, even when I wasn't present to nurture these qualities in him. Sarah turned to face him, a serious expression on her face. You're here now, that's what matters, and you're doing a great job. The simple words carried an enormous weight, a validation that Michael didn't know he needed. For a moment he felt his eyes burn with contained tears. Thank you, he said simply, unable to elaborate further. Sarah nodded, understanding what wasn't being said. Then, with a small smile, she added, but you still need to improve on the pancakes, yours are still too thick. Michael laughed, grateful for the break in the emotional intensity. I'll practice more, he promised. I have a great teacher now, after all. The smile they exchanged at that moment contained all the possibilities of the future they were building together, not just as employer and employee, not just as adults united for the well-being of a child, but as two people who had found, amid pain and chance, a meaningful connection, a new beginning, a second chance to form a family. And as the lights of New York twinkled in the distance, Michael knew with a certainty he hadn't felt in years that they were on the right path. That the bonds that had been damaged were now being rebuilt, stronger and more authentic. That the void left by Beth would never be completely filled, but that there was room for new affections, new connections, new beginnings. The journey wouldn't always be easy. There would be adjustments, challenges, moments of doubt. But together, Michael, Ethan, Sarah, and Emily, they would find their way, one step at a time, one day at a time, building not just a shared routine,